typing your questions at any time. So now I do want to turn it over to our wonderful guests and our featured speakers today, Philippe and Ashlan. Hello, everyone, or both of you. How are you today?
We're so excited to be here.
Great. We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We're doing a series of live virtual events, as you know, through the National Biodiversity Teach-In. And so we're just talking about a lot of ocean conservation. We started this morning talking with HookPod in England, who you've met, Philippe. And we were also talking with folks here in Florida, on the east coast of Florida, about manatees and power plants and the relationship. So now we have our headliners, Philippe and Ashlan Cousteau. So why don't you
mostly Ashlan. I'm just tagging along.
Why don't you,
+1.
I love it. I love it. So why don't you go ahead and maybe introduce yourself, and I'll go ahead and I'll get your slides ready.
Amazing.
Right.
Do you want to start, or you want me to start?
Go.
Okay.
You're the main headliner.
So hi everyone. My name is Ashlan Cousteau. I am I'm a journalist and I'm an adventurer, but most importantly, I am a water baby.
That's right.
I have been enjoying the water since I was a tiny kid. There I am at age, I think 7, as swimmer of the week. And my parents would always joke that even if we weren't near a pool, a lake, or an ocean, I would try to find a water puddle to swim in.
Yes.
So my heart has always been in the water.
Indeed. And I also grew up in and around the water, the ocean. My name is Philippe Cousteau. I'm a filmmaker, as you saw in the description of this webinar, an explorer and third generation of a family dedicated to environmental sustainability. There, I was just saying, next slide. So that is me at about 5 years old. And
Awesome haircut.
I know, I love this slide because even though my mother to this day denies it, I always tell people I'm convinced she just put a bowl on my head. She did cut my hair when I was this age.
You know, and it's kind of a trend of the day too back then.
It was a very hip thing. We're talking the 80s.
Don't be ashamed. Don't be
cool
ashamed.
at the time, not so much now, but I own it. But that's my grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, and he was a filmmaker as well, and the co-inventor of the aqualung, or what we call scuba today. 75 years ago, actually, 76 years ago, actually, this year, he co-invented scuba diving with an engineer named Émile Gagnon. And for those of you who don't know, that was the first time that human beings were able to swim freely in the ocean.
I think we have an iconic picture.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, right? Here. Because there he is with just in the background there, you can see off of his chin the device that they invented, which is a regulator, which is virtually unchanged to this day. And what it allowed people to do was take air under pressure in a bottle, a tank, and breathe it at ambient air pressure, no matter what depth they were underwater. So for the first time, people could swim freely like a fish. If you go to the next slide.
Because before that, this is how people explored our oceans in these huge, giant, heavy hats. We even have one sitting behind us in our living room, but it's a big, giant copper hat. They had to go down with lead boots. They would clomp around on the seafloor, and they would have their buddy up at the surface pumping air to them. And you hope that you really liked your friend at the top because he was your lifeline to the surface.
That is true. Oh, nice, Philippe.
Here,
have either of you ever done helmet diving before?
No.
I have.
You have?
Yes.
You have?
Like this.
So this is an old original big copper helmet that was used, and the seal down here was screwed into a gasket on a rubber, as you see in the photograph, on a galvanized rubber suit that was waterproof. And you had big lead boots, as Ashlan said, and you clomp around on the bottom, and someone would pump air down to you from a hose on the surface. So I got to go diving in a hard helmet, but a modern day hard helmet, a Mark IV, I think it was called.
Here, I'll model while you talk.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll be the model.
This thing weighs like 15 pounds easily.
They are so heavy.
And so we went diving because people still use hard helmet diving for commercial diving when they're working underwater for hours at a time. And we went diving into the Gulf oil spill, the BP oil spill. It was 10 years ago now, and to see, but we had to be in full hazmat equipment because the oil and crucially the chemicals they put on the oil to try and make it sink, into the water are toxic. So I did go with the hard helmet there, but not quite this old school.
I'm like, ooh, that's giving me a headache.
I know, it's
okay. You want to put her back up there?
So 75 years ago, that was really how people explored prior to 75 years ago. So my grandfather was a revolution in ocean exploration. And it's kind of wild, right? When you think about it, it's really only a lifetime ago since human beings have really been able to explore the ocean. And then in the next slide, my grandfather was joined by my father, Philippe Sr., whom I'm named after. And together they created documentaries and films like the famous Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, some of you may be familiar with, that aired on television through the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And again, was the first time that people around the world got to see what sharks and coral reefs and things that we take for granted for today. Nobody really knew what that stuff even looked like. And so over the last 75 years. It was their television
debut.
That's right. That's right. Over the last 75 years, has really been the beginning of real human exploration of the ocean. And in that same amount of time, also the greatest destruction of our oceans. Go to the next slide. Now, we like to show this slide because it shows the growth in human population on Earth. And that's important because essentially what it's showing us is that from 0 AD, about 2,000 years ago, as you can see in the bottom left-hand side here, there were only around maybe 100 million people, 200 million people on Earth is the estimate. And so it took about 2,000 years until somewhere around 1910, when my grandfather was born, we hit about 1.6 billion people on Earth. That was 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. And from that point on, we really, the population growth, and around World War II, post-World War II, the population growth on Earth skyrocketed. And now we're at about almost 8 billion people. So if you think 2,000 years to get to around 1 billion people, and then 100 years to get another 7 billion people, get up to 8 billion people. Yet we have the same amount of resources, same amount of water, the same amount of food, the same amount of natural systems, fish, et cetera, actually less now because we're fishing it, than we've ever had. And so same amount of land, et cetera. So how we deal with that population growth has really been what's putting essentially stress on our environment, because we treat our environment now with 8 billion people basically the same way we treated it 100 years ago when there were around a billion and a half people on Earth. And you can't do that. You can't continue to destroy and burn in this extractive economy that through this industrial revolution that we created has had very bad consequences.
Philippe and I say a lot of the stuff that we talk about is very serious, and it can be scary. And it can be, oh, is that right?
Yes.
No, mine's first, then your video.
Oh.
See, Philippe's trying, he just doesn't remember things. So these things can be very serious. So it's nice sometimes, or refreshing sometimes, to take a little bit of a different look at it. And sometimes we like to look at things with a little bit of humor. So on that next slide, it is funny, but it is true. And you can see the difference between 1959 and today. In 1959, the fish were big and the people were little. And today, the fish are little and the people are big. And what this is really talking about is our overconsumption and our consumption of our resources. Because, you know, in the last 40 years, which is just Philippe and I's lifetime, we have lost 50% of the total biodiversity on our planet. And that is a very scary number.
It's shocking when you think about that. In our lifetime, half the biodiversity gone.
And a lot of that is gone from our seas.
Mm-hmm. So, and in fact, you know, this is a story I grew up with from my grandfather. He started to see this kind of decline in the health of the oceans from the 1960s. And is really what put him on the path of wanting to be a filmmaker and a storyteller to sound the alarm for the world. But that decline has continued to happen. And I've seen it with my own eyes. So the next slide, you are correct, is a short video we wanted to share with you from several years ago when I was down in the Florida Keys. And we went down there to show just in a short period of time what has happened in the Florida Keys.
And we might have a hiccup with the video, of course.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Well, we can talk about it.
You know what I could do? You want me to try and share?
You want to try
mine?
and share yours? Yep, that would
Yeah,
work.
and it may not, the sound was not working earlier, but we can talk through it at least.
We can definitely
You'll
try
be
it.
able to see. The main thing is the visuals.
Yep,
that we want you
absolutely.
all to see.
Sounds good. And it's looking like we do have a lot of folks that have logged on to YouTube watching the live stream. We have a lot of people in this Zoom right now. So hello, everyone out there. Thank you for joining us today. Feel free to type in your questions in the chat space for Philippe and Ashlan. And we're going to go ahead and get that video queued up. And if the sound doesn't work, they can talk right over it. Perfect.
Is that working? Coming through?
No, sound not coming through.
Okay, sound is not coming through, but this is the Florida Keys. We were with Bob Woodruff, and essentially what he's saying is that, you know, it was one of the first time he'd been diving on Lou Key, or free diving in this case. And, you know, even though the rock is dead in spots, it still looked really good for his eyes because he's never seen it before.
There's some fish.
Yeah, there's some fish and coral.
A little bit of coral.
So it you know, it looked nice enough for him, was his response. And then, you know, there's some little goatfish there and parrotfish and a barracuda that we got to see while we were down there. So there was some life, there's some things, there's some a little bit of healthy coral right here that you can see.
But again, remember, that was his first time on this reef.
Exactly. So it wasn't until here where we have video from the same exact place on the reef from the 1980s that we're showing with video we just took that day on the reef. So this is 2009, so about 11 years ago. And this is 10 years prior to that. We're seeing much more vibrant schools of fish, much healthier coral. You'll see here these French angelfish. You'll see here in a moment the same spots, because we had the same underwater cameraman who took us to the same spot that he filmed this. So look at all that elkhorn coral, all that healthy coral, and this in the same exact spot 10 years later is what that reef looks like. Pretty shocking. You know, and that's just a trend that we've now seen in the Great Barrier Reef and we've seen around the world. So clearly the environment is declining. I think everybody on this webinar would agree. I'd rather have the coral reefs from 1989. And you know what? Even those reefs compared to the reefs in the 70s and 60s were degraded. So we are facing a very real crisis.
And that kind of leads us to, we wanted to talk to you guys about kind of the top 3 things, the main things that our ocean is facing. And if our ocean's facing it, that means we are facing it, because our ocean is 71% of our planet. So it runs the planet, let's be honest. It should have been called planet ocean or planet water, not Earth. So the first thing we want to talk about is something that I know all of you know about, and it is pollution. And pollution comes in a lot of different forms, but right now, what is really so horrible, and we can all see it every time we go to the beach, is plastic pollution. So we have 8 million metric tons of plastic that is entering our oceans every single year. Now that is the same as one New York City garbage truck full of plastic, just driving it over to the ocean and dumping it in every single minute. Now that's on top of the already 100 million metric tons of plastic that's already in our ocean. And if we keep going on this rate, scientists expect that by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in our ocean than fish. And that is terrifying.
It's terrifying, because what do you call an area of land or water that is mostly trash?
A dump.
A dump. So it's conceivable that human beings could turn the oceans into a dump in 50 years.
And billions of people rely on seafood as their only source of protein around the world. So if those people don't have fish to eat, it would be very, very, very bad for them. Now it's not just plastic pollution. It's not just, I
get emotional and
it's not just plastic pollution though. We have to look at also agricultural runoff. That is pesticides, herbicides, things that are coming, everything that's coming from our land and making its way into our oceans. Right now we have a dead zone. I mean, we have multiple dead zones, many dead zones all around the world, but there is a massive dead zone that is the size of Massachusetts, just in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, it's shocking. So, you know, plastics get the attention, but there's lots of different kinds of pollution that are affecting the health of the oceans. And from dead zones to also, I mean, just waste from shipping, waste from fossil fuels. There's mercury pollution in our oceans that is predominantly from the burning of coal and coal-fired power plants. So, you know, you may have heard about the concerns around eating too much tuna or the big pelagic ocean-going fish like that, because there's a lot of mercury. Well, guess where that mercury comes from? It's not just there automatically. It's there because it's largely coming out of coal-fired power plants up into the air and then whoop, coming down into the ocean. So there's lots of different kinds of pollution, and we are hammering the oceans and have been doing so for a long time.
Next one's you.
Next one. So this is a photo from Hurricane Sandy, a major hurricane that hit New Jersey several years ago. And wanted to show this because this is the other big issue we wanted to briefly mention is carbon. Now, I don't say climate change because it's more than just that. Certainly, climate change is causing the oceans to warm. The oceans have absorbed about 90% of the energy, the excess heat that has been trapped from the greenhouse gas effect here on this planet. And the oceans absorb that, and they've done us a tremendous service, because if it wasn't for the oceans absorbing all that heat, our average temperatures would be up to 30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. Unlivable.
That's a lot.
Folks, unlivable. So the oceans have done a tremendous job for us. However, what's happening then is the oceans are getting warmer. And because hurricanes and tropical storms, typhoons, etc., are created by the difference between hot and cold, as the ocean surface temperatures get warmer, these storms get worse and more extreme, as we saw in Sandy, and we've started to see more frequently around the world. It devastated this area in New Jersey, cost billions and billions of dollars, impacted countless lives, and is just another example of the cost. Now, that's a climate change issue. We're also seeing sea level rise, because as the oceans warm, what happens when things get warmer? They expand. And in addition, ocean acidification. So that's kind of the little brother of climate change. It's not known as well. But as the oceans absorb carbon, they become more acidic. And so all the little creatures like coral and shrimp and crabs and many types of plankton, which are the basis of the food chain, the oceanic food chain, and all of those that create a shell out of calcium carbonate, they're unable to do so. So we're facing the collapse of fundamental food chains in the ocean, from coral reefs to plankton and pteropods, tiny free swimming snails, things like that. And again, shrimp, lobster, crab, anything. So it's terrifying, because the impact of our excessive carbon output on Earth is not only warming our planet, warming the oceans, it's also causing ocean acidification, which is fundamentally changing the very chemistry of our oceans. Our oceans have not been this acidic for millions of years. And historically, that kind of acidification has happened very, 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 very slowly. We have piled it on, and we have it in records that we have this acidification has happened precipitously and quickly over the last 150 years or so, since the beginning of the
Animals
Industrial
in
Revolution.
nature can't keep up.
Mhm.
They can't evolve quick enough.
So let's see the next one, fisheries.
Yeah.
Wow, this is another big issue. This is really a symbol of our overexploitation of the oceans. About 90% of the fisheries on Earth are either fished to capacity or overfished. Most of them are overfished.
Again, that's 90%.
90,
Like
yeah.
almost 100%.
And as Ashlan said, fish is the primary source of protein for hundreds of millions of people, main source of protein for billions. It provides trillions of dollars worth of economic activity on this planet for our global economy that we just take for granted. And it's a massive issue, because it's not only impacting people's lives, it's impacting the health of the ecosystems in the ocean, because a food web, it's not a food chain, folks. Remember, it's a food web. All of these things are interconnected. And so when we lose a species of fish, it has ripple effects throughout the ecosystem. So this is another major issue. The good news about a lot of these problems, for example, plastics, for example, fisheries, is we know how to solve them if we have the will to do it. We need to do better management of fisheries. Plastics, we need to do actual recycling, reduce single-use or eliminate single-use plastics, provide resources to the main countries in Southeast Asia and Africa that are dumping a lot of that plastic into the ocean, because they don't have alternative means of recycling and collecting that. So it's going to take an international effort. But the good news is we know how to solve a lot of these problems. And if we don't solve these problems, Ashlan's going to talk a little bit about, this is not just an environmental issue. This is not just about fish. It's not just about whales. It's not just about sharks. It's about people. It's about our economy, our security, etc.
Exactly. And what a lot of people, when they think of the ocean, they necessarily don't think about global security. And what Philippe and I like to do is we like to connect the dots for people. We like to explain why something that happens in a fishery halfway across the world can affect you. So our next picture is a little scary, but I'm going to tell you why we're showing you this. So in 1991, there was a civil war that happened in Somalia. And because of that civil war, the government collapsed. And therefore, there was no Coast Guard that could defend their waters.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Somalia is a country in the east coast of Africa, just at the bottom of the Red Sea. So kind of halfway up the east coast of Africa.
And those are super fertile waters. I mean, they are fabulous, beautiful, had many, many fish, and really supported these local fishermen for generations. They were small operators. They would go out on their boat, catch fish, bring them in, sell them to people. Well, when the Civil War happened and there was no Coast Guard, there was no one to protect the waters. So what happened was fishing vessels from giant countries all over the world, the EU, United States, all over Asia,
China, Russia.
they all came in and they started scooping up as much fish as they possibly could.
Illegally,
leaving the local fishermen with not enough fish to even feed their own families. So they were desperate. They started trying to take their little boats and go out to the big boats and scare them away as much as they could. They started arming themselves and they started shooting guns at these ships to make them go away. Because remember, as Philippe said, these boats, these big giant boats were there illegally. These people couldn't feed their kids. So after they armed themselves, once or twice, they ended up getting on these boats to try to scare them. And people, the big companies, started calling and say, well, we'll give you millions of dollars if you just let our boat go. Light bulb went off. Ding. So these out of work fishermen that were just trying to protect their waters then realized that they could make money by capturing these boats and ransoming them off. So after a few generations, these fishermen turned into pirates, and the fishermen had turned into gangs, and those gangs turned into pirates. And the Somali pirates is still a global issue, and has cost the world billions of dollars every year in global commerce, cost thousands of lives. And it all could have been fixed with just a few $1 million worth of fisheries protection from the very beginning.
Yeah, there's an interesting Department of Defense, United States Department of Defense report that actually uses the Somali pirates as a case study. And it concludes, this DoD government report from the United States military concludes with that exact statement. It says a few $1 million of fisheries conservation could have avoided all of that. Think about that. A few $1 million of investment to help these people would have saved now hundreds of billions of dollars, thousands of lives. It's staggering. So that's a great example of how, as Ashlan said, connecting the dots. What we do in the ocean has an impact. And a lot of the funding that these pirates are making is now going to terrorism organizations like Al-Shabaab, Lord's Resistance Army, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. So terrorist organizations that are threatening us here. So it's one of those things that helps demonstrate we're all connected and the oceans connect all of us. And when we don't take care of the oceans, we all pay the price.
Yeah. But we don't want to only give you guys depressing stuff, because that is, we want to be honest with you. We want to tell you what really is happening, but we also want to remind you and show you that there is hope. We know that these systems can correct themselves if nature is given a chance. And that is something that Philippe and I have always said. But for me specifically, it wasn't until we went to the Marshall Islands a few years ago. And this was an area that is in the middle of the Pacific. It is where the United States did all of our nuclear testing during the Cold War. And it's where we detonated our largest nuclear bomb ever, Castle Bravo. When that bomb went off, it actually turned in like 3 seconds, or less than 3 seconds, 3 like milliseconds, to the temperature of our sun. It actually was so hot that it melted half of this island, Bikini Atoll. It turned it into glass. The sand was so hot it melted into glass. Everything was destroyed within miles. And Philippe and I went back there.
Actually, why don't you
wanna
we
roll
don't
it
have, we don't have
first?
sound, so
Oh, that's true.
we'll talk through it.
We might have sound. Let's check this out.
Okay, fingers crossed for sound.
Bikini Atoll, a remote South Pacific paradise, lost in time. Then, in 1946, this faraway coral atoll became a nuclear test site. Over the next 12 years, 23 atomic tests wiped out every living thing for miles around. 60 years later, Bikini is still radioactive.
Spiking up. I think we should get out of here.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time here.
But life abounds in unexpected ways.
They're keyed in. They know that we're here.
The sharks are back.
Now! Oh!
But how is a mystery. Reef sharks don't migrate. So where do they come from? And how did they get here?
Right now we have about a dozen sharks feeding.
Ashlan and Philippe Cousteau
You guys ready?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
are on an expedition to solve the mystery of Bikini's nuclear sharks.
Okay, now, first thing I want to tell you guys is when I was on the back of the boat, looked like harpooning something. I was not. I was tagging a shark, and I actually was very proud of tagging that shark. And last we heard, she's still doing super well.
Yep.
But we went there because, like in the video, 23 nuclear bombs. That's what we tested on those islands. Everything was wiped out. Philippe and I did not know what to expect when we got in the water for the very first time. And when we got in, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It not only had nature rebounded, it had flourished. There was coral, beautiful coral everywhere. There were giant clams that were almost bigger than I could get my arms around. Not that I was touching them, but I was just looking at how big they were. There were sharks everywhere. There were groupers and tuna that were the size of dogs. I mean, it was absolutely amazing to see that just 60 years prior, knowing that that place was completely wiped out, it was just dead. 60 years later, when everybody just backed away and gave it a chance, it came back and it flourished. And for me, that was one of those moments in my life that I knew that nature could do this. I knew that the ocean could fix itself. We just have to give her a chance.
Yeah, it was a really amazing, one of my favorite experiences. I've been all over the world like Ashlan, and yeah, I think the Marshall Islands for both of us was a special place because it did remind us of the resilience of nature. And so that's the hopeful message that we wanted to share with you all, that we've seen with our own eyes. And there's a lot of efforts to try and help make that happen. One of them is a program called 30 by 30. The prominent Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson said several years ago that in order to stop the biodiversity decline on Earth, that we need to protect half of land and 30% of the ocean, meaningfully protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. So it's a program called 30 by 30 that we support and work with, and really recognizing that in many cases, the best thing we can do for the oceans is just to leave it alone. Do our part to help restore where needed and renew and clean up, but ultimately leave it alone. There was one of the researchers that we met who did work in Chernobyl. Say he's got a famous quote, and he says, "Radiation is bad for nature. People are worse." So there is hope. There are tools and resources, and we know what to do out there. We know how to help fix and solve these problems. And in many cases, I said it's cleaning up. And as Ashlan said, it's giving nature a chance. So 30 by 30 is a great program. We'd love you all to check out. Ocean Unite is a terrific organization backed by Virgin Unite, Richard Branson's organization. And we're thrilled to be partners with that program. I think, is there another slide, Casey?
There is. Would you like me to share your social slide?
Oh yes, why don't we jump to that,
yeah,
and then we can
perfect.
kind of leave that up and take some questions, or
Absolutely.
jump back and forth, or share some of this with you. This, in case you want to check us out or follow anything what we're doing with on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, it's just P Cousteau or Ashlan Cousteau. And then we just launched, because YouTube is fun, and there's a lot of cooking shows, and there's a lot of stuff around trick shots with the basketball, across a building. but there's not a lot about the oceans on YouTube. So we just launched a channel just a few weeks ago where we do stuff with fun interviews. Our latest one is with the amazing Ocean Ramsey. We do some interesting news. We're also doing some tips about how to be more eco-friendly. We just launched one today that is all about how to reduce plastic use in the kitchen. We're going to do those around our house. So travel tips, things like that. So check that out on YouTube and subscribe. And of course, EarthEcho, you all know EarthEcho, that website, earthecho.org, and all the work we do there.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, now I think if you guys are ready, it is a great time to toss it over for some questions. And so what we're going to do is we are going to head over. We actually have a ton of questions coming in from our YouTube viewers. So let me see if I can get these. So here, let's go with this first one. This one comes from Jenna, and she asks, what area of Earth has seen the most devastation due to our loss of biodiversity?
Ooh.
Well, I would say, if we want to talk about, keep on the theme of the oceans, probably the Caribbean is one really good example, one place. There are several, I would say, around the world. The Great Barrier Reef has suffered tremendously, but the Caribbean is largely, the reefs there are pretty much dead. We've only been to a handful of places, I think. Belize, Lighthouse Reef, for example. Little areas that are protected.
Oh, that are still good?
Yeah, that are still good. Bonaire, that tries really hard to protect its reefs for tourism. But yeah, most of the Caribbean is dead. The reefs, the Belize Reef is the second longest barrier reef in the world. The Florida Keys is the third longest barrier reef in the world. Those are largely considered dead zones, certainly the Florida Keys. So in the ocean, I would say tourism, over the last 60 years, has really devastated the reefs. Coastal development, dumping, pollution, cruise ships, things like that have really had a terrible impact on the Caribbean. It's a devastated place to go. I would say maybe also the Mediterranean is also largely a dead zone. You dive in places in the Caribbean or in the Mediterranean that my grandfather went diving in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. And you see the video from back then, and there were coral and reefs and sharks. And you go back to those places off the coast of France or Italy or wherever now, and I've been to them all. It's just algae and a few little fish poking around. I mean, it's shocking.
And then there's even places like the deep sea. And the answer to that is we actually don't know what we've done to it because we haven't been able to study and get a baseline. So we actually don't know what our actions have done to places like the deep sea, which is just breaks my heart.
Yeah,
that is just terrifying to think that we don't even know what we have done because it's just so hard to get down there. It's easier to go to the moon than it is to get to the bottom of our ocean.
What we have found in samples is chemicals and toxins and plastics in the deepest part of the ocean. So we know we're affecting that too.
Yeah. Excellent. So, well, that's, not excellent about the decrease in biodiversity, but thank you. Another question coming in, Avanya Johnson, name might sound familiar, Philippe.
Yes.
She is here with us. So she says, some people have a seeing is believing mindset. So what would you say is the best way to educate those kind of people about environmental issues?
Get in the water. Get in the water. Dive in, get wet. I think that it's so important if people have the opportunity, because a lot of people don't have the opportunity. So if people have the opportunity to get in the water, if you live in the middle of the country, find your local water source. EarthEcho's Water Challenge is amazing, and it gets people out there to test their local quality, because remember, all water ends up in the sea. So if you can find, even in the middle of the country, a little creek by your house, know that that creek is going to make its way out to the ocean, and test it and empower yourself with knowledge to see what is the quality of that water there, knowing that it will make its way out.
That's right. Get outdoors, and EarthEcho is all about helping people do that and helping build youth leaders and helping giving you the tools to change and transform your community. It all starts in our communities. As Ivania does so much terrific work in her community to do just that and help her peers and friends connect with the ocean, knows so well. It's all about our backyards and our communities. We have such tremendous power. We have a saying at EarthEcho. It's not that you can make a difference. It's that everything you do makes a difference. All of our choices have consequences. And that's a wonderful message, I think, because it tells us just how empowered we can all be as storytellers and as advocates for the environment and for the oceans, to recognize that we can all change the world.
I agree. Now we've got 2 questions from 2 separate teachers on YouTube, but I'm going to put them together because they're both so wonderful. And actually they're a great follow-up to what you just said, Philippe. So we have the first part is, I know there's been plenty of strong youth activism in the past few years. And as a teacher, it's up to me to teach my students they can make a difference. What is your message for teachers? So there's part 1. And then following up to that, we also have, I teach English, not science, but I feel like there's a real potential for any teacher to support your message. How can I help my students to become involved?
So I'll
You
do the
take
first part.
I'll take second part.
First comment is, first of all, to all the teachers out there, thank you. Teaching is the most noble profession, and we are your biggest fans. EarthEcho works closely with teachers around the world, and it's really about helping to provide you the tools and the resources that you need to help reach young people. You're the front line for young people, and you're the ones that are talking to them and engaging with them every day. And we're here to support you. We have a lot of resources online, from our STEM Explore program that's all about careers and helping young people recognize the opportunity for careers, to our Expeditions program that provides teacher-developed curriculum enhancement content exploring critical environmental issues, from fisheries to ocean acidification. This year we have an expedition in Puerto Rico exploring climate change, to our programs in the EarthEcho Water Challenge that Ashlan mentioned, our Youth Leadership Council, the Our Echo Challenge, which we just launched, which I want all of you to check out, which is a national, here in the United States, a national competition for young people to create teams to solve biodiversity problems in their communities, for the opportunity to join us in Washington, D.C. and to win scholarship prizes. So there's a lot of resources and tools out there, and teachers are such an important part of our family, and we are so grateful for you and for what you do.
And honestly, you are right on. You don't have to be a science teacher to get kids excited about this. I think English is, that's my background. I'm a journalist.
I did history.
Yep. So but what is important is storytelling, making sure that these youth are great communicators. And to be a great communicator, it's all about telling a great story. And, you all watching, from the teachers to the students, to the parents, to the grandparents, you all are storytellers, and you are telling stories to your friends, your family, your coworkers, your peers every single day, through social media, through conversations, through going in line at the supermarket and the person in front of you forgot their bag. There's always little touch points that you can do. And we even say what's the best thing, especially that kids in high school and even college can do. And we say, study a communications course.
Yes.
Make sure you know how to talk about these stories and communicate your feelings. And that is really what the environmental movement needs to do. We need to not talk to the people that already know and already are doing the good stuff. We need to talk to the people outside of the group and talk to the people that maybe don't think about the ocean every day. We need to tell them how the ocean actually affects their life, how it keeps them safe, how it keeps their children fed. That's what we need to do, is we need to connect the dots. And so that is, thank you to all the teachers, as Philippe said, and that it's storytelling, I think, that is so important.
That's great. I love it. And that teacher did comment, Ashlan, thank you. English is the bomb. So
yeah.
I have a really interesting question that came through the chat space from Sarah, and her class is wondering, what is the best way to travel regarding our carbon footprint?
Ooh.
That's a good one for you both.
That's a great question, and that's actually something that we struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, for traveling from A to B, one of the great things in here in the US is that we're seeing an explosion of electric cars. We've been electric for 9 years. That is a terrific choice to start looking at electric cars as a mode of transportation. Of course, public transportation where it's available. Lived in Washington, D.C. for 8 years and didn't have a car. We use the metro, and certainly ride sharing and things like that is a great option. When you talk about bigger, broader travel, flying, things like that, we have to fly a lot for work. We tend on vacation to do staycations, or places where we can drive to or go into nature, go up camping, things like that. But for work, we have to travel, and it's something we struggle with for sure. I think that one of the things that we need to ensure that we do is look for those companies that are like JetBlue, United. There's some of the airlines that have clear environmental policies and goals. Support those kinds of companies. But then also this comes down to the fact that we're coming up on an election here, folks, and at least in the U.S. And it's really, really important, no matter what party we're affiliated with. This is not an advocacy for any one party at all. It's really important for us to send a message, because this should be a universal thing. Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, I don't care. We should all be recognizing clean air and clean water is important. And so when we vote in politicians that are reducing clean air and clean water standards under the guise of helping the economy, it's nonsense. When reducing fuel economy standards, fuel efficiency standards, it's also under the guise of helping the economy, or somehow, I don't know, right now, this perverted logic that it's actually good for the environment too, is nonsense. But again, this isn't about Republicans or Democrats. This needs to be a universal issue. So no matter what party you're affiliated with.
For the health of all of us.
So we need to both have government helping these companies and requiring these companies to take the steps, helping to support an innovation and technology to take the steps towards a greener, healthier future. And also in general, make sure that our politicians know, of all parties, that the one thing we're all together with and united behind is protecting our environment for ourselves and future generations. And in fact, someone's about to sit down and have breakfast, but I'm gonna go, a special treat for you all.
Wait, I'll get her, I'm closer.
Are you gonna, okay.
I'll get her, hang tight.
Y'all get to see our next generation. As some of you may know, we call baby fish Vivienne, who's our 8-month-old little girl. She just came back from a walk. And so she's going to join us for the last few minutes here. There she is. She's got a bib because she's about to have lunch.
Hi, Vivienne.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Well, let's see here. We do have, let me give you another question. And then we are going to share a little bit more about those programs you mentioned with EarthEcho International. So we'll share those out, and then we'll kind of do one more wrap. So let's see here. Oh, this is a good one about sharks. Sharks are apex predators of the ocean. So they always control the populations of food. How does the warming waters affect sharks?
Ooh.
Well, sharks are connected to the ecosystem in a critical way. It's apex predators at their top of the food web. Mm-hmm. So when warming waters, which are impacting, for example, we were talking about not just the warming waters.
Speaking of sharks, she's getting hungry.
Yeah.
She'll be back.
Okay. The acidification of the ocean. As we see fisheries collapse, as we see coral reefs, which are home to such an important diversity of fish at any number of different points in their life cycle. As we see those systems collapse, those fisheries disappear, yeah, it has a huge impact on the sharks because there's less food for them, less healthy ecosystems for them to inhabit. And then, of course, direct pollution, overfishing. You know, sharks are a massive bycatch of longline fisheries, gillnet fisheries,
and
things
people
like
are
that.
Still catching them for their fins.
And then there's direct fishing of sharks, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
About 100 million sharks a year. Humans kill 100 million sharks a year, which is just a staggering number.
Actually, we talked about that in our interview with Ocean Ramsey. That's on our YouTube page. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you all. Well, let's talk a little bit more about EarthEcho International and some of those exciting programs that you did mention, Philippe. So EarthEcho International does invite everyone out there to join us for our exciting programs. One of them, Philippe did mention, EarthEcho Expeditions. It's an annual program for teachers and their students that leverages the rich Cousteau legacy of exploration and discovery to bring STEM education content alive through free resources like engaging videos and STEM design challenges. So you can explore those resources from our 2019 expedition, What's the Catch, on sustainable fisheries, and more on our website, earthecho.org. We also mentioned the EarthEcho Water Challenge. So did you know you can become a citizen scientist? The EarthEcho Water Challenge builds public awareness and involvement in protecting water resources around the world by engaging citizens to conduct basic monitoring of their local water bodies. So as Ashlan said, get out there. Even if you're not near the ocean, discover your local water bodies. Everything is connected. So again, visit our website to learn more. And of course, you can join EarthEcho International as we highlight relatable voices and exciting life experiences to make careers in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We want to make those careers come alive with our program, STEM Explore. Now, with STEM Explore, we strive to connect students to professionals in STEM to inspire the next generation of STEM explorers with videos and live virtual career connections. So you can join in the conversation right there on our website. Now, Philippe also did mention we have a brand new program that we are so excited to announce from EarthEcho International. And Philippe, I'm going to let the other Philippe do the talking here with a little introductory video.
I'm Philippe Cousteau, and I am so excited to announce the latest program from EarthEcho International. It's called the EarthEcho Challenge, and it's a new way for students to protect biodiversity and get the funding to do it. The EarthEcho Challenge empowers teams of middle school students to explore their community, identify threats to local species, and then submit an idea for a project that will help to restore a healthy ecosystem. 10 finalist teams will join EarthEcho International in Washington, D.C. to present their ideas, and the top 3 teams will be awarded grants to turn their project into a reality. Go to ourechochallenge.org and join our STEM competition by submitting your plan to change the world.
So I think nobody could say it better. Thank you, Philippe. So again, visit our website to submit your plan to help change the world. Our deadline is March 22nd, 2020. We so look forward to seeing your entries come through. And of course, be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho International on our social media channels, as well as that website that we have continually mentioned. We do want to give a special thank you and shout out to the National Biodiversity Teach-In and the students and teachers at Elgin High School for inviting us to be part of this tremendous event. Thank you all so much. And of course, again, we want you to follow along on Philippe and Ashlan's adventures on social media. And don't forget, subscribe to their YouTube channel, and you can chat about the ocean every single week with Philippe and Ashlan. So we really hope that they do see more of you, and we want to keep this conversation going. So with that said, Philippe and Ashlan, I'm going to turn it back to you. Do you have any last parting words of wisdom for people out there connecting with us today?
I think just remember, you all can make a difference. As Philippe said, everything you do makes a difference. So choose to make a better difference.
That's right. And to all of old friends like Ivania and new friends like so many of you that are joining us for the first time, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today on Friday. Happy Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
And and we hope you have a wonderful weekend, and look forward to seeing you participate and work with us over the coming years. As Asha said, to make a better, positive difference in the world together.
Together we can do it.
I agree. So on behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you all for joining us, and keep exploring. Bye-bye, everyone.